Hey, it's Joel Johnson from Mixtape the Game. I want to share with you guys a little bit of my story and all of the steps that it took to bring Mixtape to market. My hope is that it helps one person, right? One person getting ready to start on their journey. Hopefully I can answer some questions. Hopefully the things that I went through might help you build an outline for your own product strategy, but either way, I think it's important that you guys know where Mixtape came from and what it took to get here. So here we go.
Come on! Yeah! Here we go! Yeah! 1, 2, 3, 4!
So we got our product name, we've got all of our digital assets and locations secured. We've got everything protected best we can, and we've got our design. So the next stage for me was production, like who am I gonna hire or pay to make Mixtape? The reason I went to production first is because before I start figuring out how I'm gonna pay for this, I need to know what it's gonna cost. So I knew that I was doing a card game and I was probably gonna use Kickstarter to try and get it funded. So a little Google search. Google is your best friend when it comes to this stuff. I was looking for manufacturers that had worked with successful Kickstarters before, especially in kind of the board game, card game industry. So I knew Cards Against Humanity was a successful Kickstarter, and I was able to find do some research and find out, who created their first deck. Having played Cards Against Humanity before, I knew what the quality was. The glossy cards, the glossy box, the quality was high. So I was pretty comfortable with, reaching out to that manufacturer because I knew what I'd held in my hands, what they had produced for someone before. So, a little bit of research and a little bit of communication with their production department, and I had, quotes for different quantities so that I knew, okay, what's a realistic goal for a Kickstarter? Is it, $10,000? Is it $5,000? Is it $25,000? I mean, you don't really know that stuff, but by having the quote first, now I could move forward with the next step, which was trying to get it funded.
I want to add a little caveat to that. The reason you want to have a quote is because my Kickstarter goal was a dollar amount, but that dollar amount needed to pay for a certain amount of decks, right? So I could have gone with a $30,000 goal, probably wouldn't have met it, and I don't know if I could store that many decks in my garage, but you need to know the amount of decks or the amount of products that dollar amount will produce. So for me, $15,000 got me 2,500 decks. That seemed reasonable, and looking at the profit margin and all the math stuff, would have allowed me to move forward and produce more. So remember that when you're looking at the reasons why you want a quote, when you're considering your goal dollar amount. Aim high, but be honest and realistic with yourself.
Kickstarter for me was a great place to try and get Mixtape funded. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I didn't know what the future held. So it seemed like a safe place to try and put this to the test. So when you do a Kickstarter, this was my first one, you need to research. There are thousands of people who have written about how to run a successful Kickstarter campaign. They provide information, they provide guidance for rewards and how you should price those rewards and what should your goal be, what's achievable. With Kickstarter, it's you either get all or you get nothing. And I didn't want to have to do more than one of them. So because I had my quote for production, I had zeroed in on what I thought would be an attainable goal. Kind of did some really elementary math to get there. I wrote all the copy, I made all the graphics, I put in all the information. I probably went back and revised or edited or, just generally made sure that everything was correct, let's say 100 times, you know. I wasn't in any hurry. I wasn't under any deadline. I just wanted to make sure that I was thorough. And so that's the other thing I would suggest with Kickstarter. Take your time, you know. As excited as I was, the research and the revision process and all of that stuff really, I feel like, made it a nice looking and easy to read and fun Kickstarter campaign. And you know, the last part about that is that the personality of Mixtape came through in the campaign. At least I think it did. So the Kickstarter was a success. My parents generously kicked in enough to kind of help us reach our goal. I let all the backers know, you know, and tried to keep them up with weekly communications about where we were. I had the production quote in hand, so it was just a matter of getting the final art files to the manufacturer, which was Breaking Games also. I want to mention them. They did a great job. Fantastic job. But yeah, so I had the quote. I reached out and said, hey, here's the money. Here's what I want. What's the timeline? That's another thing you need to think about. The production timeline on a product like this, it's manufactured in China, was about 90 days. And those windows, although they say 60 to 90 days or 120 days, they always fluctuate, right? It's getting manufactured in another country and being shipped over, usually by boat. Then it has to get delivered to, you know, received in the United States, and then it has to be shipped here. So all of that went pretty much on schedule, so I was fortunate there.
Anytime you're looking to print something or produce something overseas, you need to be conscious of the production schedule for everyone else in the world who's making a product. So for the card game industry, companies like mine who use overseas manufacturers or printing companies, they're going to start printing games in the middle of the summer so that they can get the thousands of units that they need to the US and onto the shelves by holiday. So there's a season where you don't want to reach out to a manufacturer and say, hey, will you make my game? It's August 1st, because they're going to be slammed. The production timelines are going to be longer, and you're probably going to get it after Christmas, which isn't ideal unless, it's just not ideal. So if you want to get into the production life cycle of things, you want to be sending things to print in early spring so that you can have all of your products before Christmas, which in this case is the heavy buying season.
My job at the time required me to go out of the country for work. So 1,500 mixtape decks arrived on a shipping pallet while I was in Sweden. So that was fun.
That fact is actually incorrect. It's not 1,500 decks, it was 2,500 decks. The camera makes me nervous. And also feels like a really long time ago. Wasn't that long, but 2,500 decks. That's what the Kickstarter order was. Continue.
Thankfully, my brother Jordan lives about a mile away. He was able to come over, get the pallet off the truck, and wheel it into the garage, and we had mixtape decks. So when I got back from Sweden, I had actually unpacked a box and literally held the first finished version of Mixtape, and it was pretty cool. You know, the journey from idea, you know, drinking a few beers and talking about games and music games, to now holding one in my hand. Yeah, it was a cool moment. From conception to holding a deck in my hand probably took about 1.5 years, and I did it as often and as fast as I could, working a full-time job. Mixtape was a side hustle, and I did it as thorough as I could. Don't think that you have to get everything done in 7 days. The time it takes to research and just be thoughtful about everything you do will set you up for success more than rushing through and thinking you know everything, because you don't. I didn't. I still don't, but I've learned a lot, so that's why I'm telling you about my experience. So that part of the work was done, but we had more to follow, more work. How do we sell this thing? Where do we put it? What do we do with it? What do we price it? Okay, so I have the decks. The first thing I had to do was I had to send out all of my rewards to everyone. So when I did the Kickstarter, you have the deck, but I also made coasters, I made stickers, I made beer koozies, and then for people that, donated at the highest tier, backed us at the highest tier, which was $100, they got to send me a card, their scenario that they came up with on their own, and we put their name and city on the deck. I didn't get a ton of takers, but I was really proud of the fact that, I had included the people who helped create the product in the product. I think that's one of the things that the research that I did, there was something there that I read that just was like, oh yeah, I should make other people a part of this, and I want to do that more in the future with future decks. I'm hoping the app kind of helps produce some of that crowdsourced type content where, if you play the app or you get on the website and you send us a scenario, we're going to print it and we're going to put it in the box. I want you to be part of this too, because who does that? I can't think of anyone. So I think it's also kind of clever, right? Which helps.
Here's proof of concept, proof of life, if you can see that. You're the seventh wheel at a dinner party full of couples that keep calling each other babe and baby. You look down at your text messages to discover you've just been dumped for the 4th time this year. Wow. This song plays in your head. That was written by Melissa, Brad, and Nate. It was like a group effort from Westwood, Kansas. So the funny story to go with Melissa, Brad, and Nate, but I'll share that another time. They were early supporters of Mixtape, very involved in the entrepreneur community here in Kansas City, and they helped me get started. So they backed us. We put their scenario, their name, their city, their state on a card, and that's how you involve people in your product. You ask them, some say yes, some say no, but when they do, when you do it with Mixtape, you get immortalized on a card. After I got the rewards out, I had to build a website. I use Squarespace. It's affordable, and the designs were slick enough, and it was user-friendly so that I could get something going real fast. It also allowed, it has a pay portal on it, so I think I used Square so people could purchase straight from the website. That took a while, but once it was launched, I was selling decks. At this point too, you also have to think about the shipping logistics of being your own company, right? So I went to Uline and I ordered 500 boxes, ordered a 300-foot roll of black paper. I had to print labels. I had to buy moving tape or box, stuff to package these things up and ship them across the United States. The other thing I bought, because I couldn't pay for printed boxes, right? So I bought a rubber stamp, had it custom made with the Mixtape logo, and I would stamp each box as creatively as I thought I could to kind of brand these boxes so that when people got them in the mail, instead of a white box with nothing on it, it was branded Mixtape as cheaply as possible. Be frugal with your stuff. You're starting out. If you got a lot of money, go for it. But I didn't, so you got to be creative and clever. Boom. Rubber stamp. This cost me $6 on Amazon and made it very clear that when the package arrived at your front door, you knew exactly what it was. I actually have a picture on Instagram where I brought like 60 boxes into the Leawood postal office, whatever. And they were all little Mixtape white boxes, filled up like a whole bin, had them all over the counter. The postmasters there were friendly. It was cool. They learned the whole story. Hopefully they bought a deck, but yeah, rubber stamp on a white box, black ink, pops. There are probably thousands of postmen around the world and postwomen who own mixtapes just because they saw that box, I'd like to think. So the website was built. We were shipping out a couple boxes here and there from people that had discovered Mixtape or word of mouth from someone who had backed the Kickstarter. But I wanted to see if I could get it into retail stores, right? I mean, the goal was always to see if we could successfully sell it in Kansas City
Kansas City's a pretty cool place. There's a lot of culture. There's, it's got a creative vibe to it, an entrepreneurial vibe. There's good food. There's art. There's, the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, it's a good city as a test market. So I thought, well, if I can find some retailers here in Kansas City who believe in it and will sell it, put it on their shelves, there's a good chance I could replicate that in other cities across the U.S. So I had to take Mixtape, create a little sell sheet for it, and start knocking on doors and walking into stores and introducing myself and introducing the product and asking people if they'd be willing to carry it. I was fortunate enough that there are enough kind of small boutique stores in Kansas City that are receptive to products, especially products made by people in Kansas City, that a lot of them said yes. A lot of them said yes, and then after the first 20 decks they ordered, they didn't reorder. Others carried it until I ran out of decks and actually pushed the product. So, putting a face to something for a small retailer is much better than just grabbing something and hoping it sells. There was a story behind it, and there was a person behind it, and he was local to Kansas City. He lived here. So I think that helped. So kind of the last part of that was I'd gotten into retail stores, I had the website going, the Mixtape website, and I wanted to get it on Amazon. I mean, it's a natural progression. Luckily, they had something called Launchpad, which was for startups or Kickstarter type products. So it was easy to set up a little bit of like a quick shop. I didn't have to go through a lot of the traditional red tape that you would as an Amazon seller. So that was helpful, and man, that really helped. I mean, Amazon was ordering about 30 decks every other week, which was cool. The other thing I did was I wanted to see if I could get it into like another e-commerce retailer, right? Someone that was a little bit more, I don't want to say hipster, but that's kind of what I mean. But someone who just had kind of a certain product niche that Mixtape would fit into. And I found Uncommon Goods, which is an e-commerce retailer based in Brooklyn. And the cool thing about them was that was just an email. Hey, would you guys carry my product? And we had some back and forth and some logistic stuff to figure out, but they said yes. And the cool thing about them is, they do kind of have a little music category, and they gravitated towards it. They understood Mixtape. They liked that it was made by a person and not like Hasbro or someone. And they were faithful. They've carried Mixtape from the day they said yes until today. And I think that's rare. It's just cool that they still have believed in it. Even for 5 years, they've carried it and sold it, and never had any issues. They just continue to push it, and it's pretty rad. So, this is 2 years removed from getting the first shipment of decks. I'm about out of mixtapes. Had to make some decisions, but fortunately, I got a phone call, and it kind of changed the direction of Mixtape. So about the time that I was out of decks from the Kickstarter, I got a phone call. I was working at, my wife and I, we had just opened an event space, and I was doing some construction there, and got a phone call from the CEO of a company called Breaking Games, and she was interested in talking about licensing Mixtape to them. The thing about Breaking Games is they have two separate parts. One is a production side called Ad Magic. They work with a lot of Kickstarter or smaller business type card games, so they were a good fit for production. And then Breaking Games is kind of the retail side of their business. So I talked with Sherry. We did some contract talks, some back and forth and stuff like that, and I said, yeah, let's do it. So I signed an agreement that allowed the licensed Mixtape to them for 4 years, and a year later they got it into Target. So the licensing has been a good experience. It's really helped kind of expand the opportunity for people to see Mixtape on shelves. You know, we've had it in Barnes and Noble, we were in Target, we've had it at Uncommon Goods. They've actually been able to place Mixtape in 9 countries. So we're even global at this point. Yeah, so overall, I mean, we did, you know, once we signed the agreement, we talked about packaging and things like that. And their team has a lot of experience with packaging design for retail shelves. You know, when you're on the shelf as a card game in Target, let's say, there's probably 100 other games there. So it was interesting to talk with their team. You know, they had a lot of good insight about some of the design elements that we could change to better communicate what the game is about before people can open it up. So, you know, we did a couple of redesigns and agreed on, you know, a box design and went into production. So, yeah, licensing is something I had thought maybe I could do. I just wasn't quite sure how to go about finding people. And fortunately, in this case, they found me. So at that point, you know, the licensing deal, my hands are off. You know, they have full control over selling and promoting Mixtape. I can't sell it myself. I can promote it, so I continue to, you know, run social media channels and stuff like that. But when it comes to selling the actual product, that all falls on them, basically. So yeah. One of the other bonuses that comes with licensing a product like mine, you know, is it gave it credibility, right? Even before Target placed an order, just the fact that a board game, card game manufacturer was interested in the product I created, they wanted me to license it to them, that gives me credibility. You know, it gets investors or you know, people I'm trying to connect with, it piques their ears a little bit because, oh wait, you've licensed this? Wow, okay. And then it had success in like the mass merchant retail market. Okay, now you have my attention. You know, there are things that I wish I would have done differently. You know, contractually speaking, I wish I would have asked more questions about, you know, how are they going to promote the game? Are they required to promote the game? As someone who doesn't know it, you know, are they going to post social media? If so, how many posts are they going to do a month? You know, they're a retailer for a lot of games, and Mixtape's just one of those. When someone approaches you for licensing, or you're looking to license your product, just make sure that you write down all of the things that you think need to happen, or you want to happen, because those are the things that you need to have a discussion about with your licensee. And all those things should get written into the contract and agreed upon. I didn't know a lot about how this stuff worked, and I think I made a lot of assumptions, but that's what being an entrepreneur is about, right? You learn from, I won't call it a mistake, but it was just, I had to educate myself. And unfortunately, that came at the expense of, okay, now I gotta run all the social media. I really was hoping that they would take more ownership in that, but I never asked for it. So just make sure that when you're looking at a licensing deal, that you make a list of everything you need or want or have questions about and share those. Because if it's not in the contract, you're not going to get it. It's been almost 4 years, and the licensing deal it's been good. It's been valuable. It's generated revenue and expanded our audience, and you know, we've made a profit off of it. So all of those things have kind of led to, or given me the ability to create the Mixtape app, which is where we're at now.
Yeah.